So I'm going to continue here with this pergola assignment and show you how to build some more roof structure for it. Most importantly, the king posts, which are the posts that sit atop of these cross member beams that you see here, and will support a ridge beam at the top, and then that in turn will support the rafters, as will these lower beams here, and we'll use a beam system to create that. So let me go ahead and switch to a different view here. It'll make it easier to place these smaller posts. I'm going to double click my floor plan level 2 view, and now you can see I'm in the corresponding view for that level. And you'll notice, first of all, you'll notice a couple of things. One is that everything is, all the beams are shown in what's called a single line diagram type of method. Depiction, and this is done typically for structural drawings. You don't typically draw a beam with the sides as the lines in a structural drawing. You typically simplify it and show it as a coarse level view. I have thin line on now, but you'll notice if I switch to thick line or normal line weight display, you can see that beams typically are shown as very heavy bold lines. So I like to work in thin line wherever possible. Easier to see things. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to switch to a fine level of detail down on the view controls. I'm going to change this to fine, and now I can see the actual beam edges as I work. It just makes it easier for me to see what I'm doing here. So what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and make some structural columns that are going to sit on top of these 3 beams that you see here. And they will be centered and constrained about the whole design, and constrained as well to be centered on tops of these beams. That way, if someone should want to change the overall design and layout of the dimensions for the columns, the beams, and the king posts will also change, as well as the column configuration, because it's all parametrically driven. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my Structure tab. I'm going to again pick the column tool. I'm going to make certain I have the vertical column selected here. And you'll notice now that when you look at the location for things, I want to again do a height. So I want to make sure this is height. I'm on level 2, and I also want to make certain that I give it a height. So right now it may be constrained to a different level. I want to use an unconnected height because I'm going to sort of control these beams manually anyway. And I'm just going to put in an arbitrary height of 3 feet. I'll adjust that later when I actually put the roof system in, but for now I just want something to work with. So 3 feet is fine. You could use 4 feet or something smaller than that, or bigger than that if you wanted to as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just move over to here. I'm intentionally going to place these off center just so you can see that I can fix this later real easily here. In fact, I'll even move it here so it's totally off centered on the post too, just to show you that it kind of doesn't matter because you're going to fix this in another way using equalization and alignment tools. So now I want to go ahead and make certain that these 3 king posts here are centered on each one of their respective beams. So I'll go to my Align tool. I will pick the center of the beam. Now if this doesn't show when you pause on top of the center of the beam, if you don't get this blue line, you can always tab select too. So don't forget, you can always tab select to find things. And we're going to use this in a moment when we center our king posts between the columns along the beam as well. So I'll go ahead and pick, I've got multiple alignment checked here. If it's not checked, that's fine for this first part of the operation, but ultimately we're going to want to check that. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this center of this beam first. So now I'm going to pick the column here, or the king post, and then I'm going to lock it to constrain it. I'm going to pick in the middle of nowhere to temporarily reset my datum so I can pick the center of this beam and then the center of this column, lock it, click in the middle of nowhere so I can reset that datum, click in the center of this beam, and then this column to lock it. Now that I've still got multiple alignments still selected, and you can see by the little symbol next to my arrow cursor that I'm still in the alignment mode, I'm going to go ahead and pick the center of this king post. So look for the little blue line. If you move around, you'll see there are 2 of them you could select here. Make certain you have the vertical edge, vertical line plane selected. I'll select this one. I'll move it to this one and select it, and I'll lock it. Now I'm not going to click in the middle of nowhere because I also want to constrain this one to align with those 2 as well, and I will lock it as well. So now all of these 3 columns, the king posts, align perfectly with one another. Now I'm going to constrain them so that they're equally spaced between this beam and this beam. Now, if you try to use the beams to do this trick, you're going to end up having problems. So you'll want to actually center it and align it based on the post that you have below here, this originally placed column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tab select and find the center of that. So once I can see it, I'll click, find the center of this one, click, find the center of this one down here by tabbing, click, move upwards, and now I will equalize those posts. There's a problem here. So here's where you want to make certain that things are aligned and locked properly. So obviously it doesn't like what I've done there. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit, undo. I'm going to delete this dimension string. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into wireframe view. And I'm going to try it again. So click and tab select to find the little post below. I want the line, not the dot. This one, and this one, and equalize. There we go. So now you can see it worked just fine. So if you have a problem like that where something moves where you don't expect it to, a couple of things you might consider is redoing the dimension and making certain that you got the right thing you expected to align and lock to or dimension to. And the other thing you might try doing as well is pinning the things that you know shouldn't move. So I could have potentially tried pinning that post below to keep it from moving, or the end of that on that. So those are a couple of techniques you might think about using. Another really useful technique sometimes is to group things. So if you group things together, they move as one object. So that's another possibility when you're having problems with Revit and it doesn't seem to do what you want to do. So at any rate, those are all now taken care of. I don't need to see this stuff here anymore, so I'm going to hide it in this view. I'll just use element hide to make those go away. I'm going to go back to my 3D view to take a look at what I've got here. While I'm here, I don't really want to see these, so I'll hold down Control and select that one as well, and I'll element hide those as well. All right, so now you can see here's my post so far. Those look okay, except that notice that they go down. They start at level 2, which is at the bottom of this beam and the top of these columns. I actually want them to come off the top of these and move up from there. There's a couple of ways I can do this. One of the ways, of course, is if I select these, I could actually control the base offset here. So if I knew what the height of this, the thickness or depth of this beam was, I can give it a base offset. That's one way you can do it. Another way, perhaps easier, is simply to use select one of these and use the attached top base function here. And what this will do is it will allow you to pick a secondary object, and it'll say this is what the base of the column or post should attach to. So I'm going to use this one. I'm going to say attach top base when this is highlighted. Notice on the option bar there are some things you want to take into consideration here. And in this case, I want to attach the column at the base of the column. So make certain you have base selected here. Then read your command line down here, or status bar, and it'll tell you can select a roof, a floor, a ceiling, a beam, a foundation, or a reference plane to attach that to. And I'm going to select this beam, and now you can see the bottom of it meets as it should with that one. I'll select this one, do the same. It'll default to the last use. I'll pick this one. I'll select this last one here, attach top base, and make sure base is still selected, and I'll pick this one. So now all of my king posts are in the correct location and reference plane to each other. They're all three centered vertically on the gable end. Now I can go ahead and put a beam on there. So I want to use the same size beam as I have here. So I'm going to click on this one, right mouse click. It's a little bit easier sometimes to work this way. And I'm simply going to say create similar from the right click menu that pops up here. And then I can snap to the end of this post here. Let me orbit up a little bit. Got to turn on 3D snapping, so make sure you have 3D snapping turned on. Snap to the end of this one here, and then snap to the end of this one here. And now you can see in the case of this one, I'm totally fine with its orientation and its Z justification being at the bottom of this beam, because I want it to move upwards from there. Okay, so there's what that beam looks like. And next thing I'm going to do is start to think about the roof for this. So now that I have these basically in place, I'm going to use the shape of my roof and the roof pitch to actually change the elevation on this post to make it, or this beam to make it work for my roof. So I'm going to go over to my second level plan again, and I'm going to sketch a roof by footprint. We all know how to do this, so I'll go to the Architecture tab. I'll go to the Roof by Footprint tool, and I will go ahead and use my pick line tool, although there are many ways you can do this. In this case, I'm using pick line because I want to have a dissimilar or unequal overhangs on the eaves compared to the rakes on this building. So I'm going to use my pick line tool. I'm going to give it an offset of 2 feet, and I'm going to click on this line here and make certain I can preview it's moving off to the side. If not, your space bar will take care of that for you. I'm going to click here. This is a gable, so both of these lines should define pitch. I'm going to change my overhang, my offset here to 1 foot now, and I'm going to pick this line here and this line down here. Okay. These two lines here are the ends of the gable, so they're rake lines, so I do not want these to define slope. So I'm going to uncheck define slope on this roof like that, on those lines. And I need to trim these up, so I will use my corner trim tool here. TR is the keyboard shortcut for that, and you can just trim these up nicely like that. And the last thing I want to do is I want to look at my slope. So down here is the slope for my roof. Now, you could change each one of these individually if you want to. You can actually click on them and change them here. However, if you haven't done anything to the roof or modified them in any way, you can just come in here and change this to a pitch that works for you. I'll change it to an 8-inch and 12-inch roofs, or an 8 and 12 roof. That means that for every 12 inches of horizontal run on the roof, it rises 8 inches. I'll click apply, and everything looks good to me. So I'm going to click check, and now you can see I have a roof here. I'm going to go into thick line view really quick so you can see something that's happening here. So you might think that your roof is broken. Notice there's a gap here, and you can see the center beam here. In fact, if I got out of wireframe, went to hidden line, you can see it looks like my roof has a problem here. That's because this is a view from level 2 where the cut plane is happening at 4 feet up off of the ground, off of the floor level 2. So that means that this cut plane is actually cutting through the roof, and that's why you're seeing these bold material cut lines here for this generic thickness on this roof. So I'm going to fix that. I'm going to make a different type of roof for this particular building as well, and we'll move forward with looking at how that works. But let's take a look at this thing three-dimensionally now. So I'll click on my 3D view tab. You can see here's what I have so far. You'll notice there are some issues here. The roof is floating, obviously. That can't really happen in the real world. So I'll fix that momentarily, and I'm also going to change the roof entirely. You'll notice if I go to a realistic view here, you can see that everything is just a homogenized blob of gray here for the roof too, and I want some materiality reflected on here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first, just for fun of it. So I'll select my roof, and I'll just drop this down, and I'll pick a type that's a little more indicative of what I'm trying to do here. And this is the architectural template, so be aware of that. The only real roof that I have here that I really want to use really is this wood rafter, 8 inches with asphalt shingle, and it's insulated. I'll click on this, and now you'll notice that you can see the patterns and the materials as well for this roof. If we were to do a section through it, we'd be able to see the different sub-assembly layers on it. But that's still not quite what I want. I don't want this generic thickness for the structure on the roof. I don't want any structure really per se at all on this. All I really want is the decking material and then the asphalt shingles. So I'm going to select the roof, go to my Properties menu, select Edit Type. I'm going to select Duplicate, and I'm going to call it something that's pertinent to me. So I'm going to just call it Pergola Roof. It might be a good idea for you to be a little more descriptive on this. So if someone's looking at your list of roofs inside of the project that they may be continuing your work on, they will know what that roof is in terms of the materials as well. So that's the way Revit typically does it. But in this case, it's simple enough just to call it Pergola Roof. Now I can click the Type Properties. Inside of the construction area, there's a Structure button. I'm going to click the Edit. And here's where I can control the assembly layers for this. So I'm going to take this wood 7.5-inch deep structure element, and I'm simply going to delete it with the delete button here. And now you can see I simply have plywood sheathing and asphalt shingle here. Now, if you wanted to make this look a little better, you could actually change from plywood sheathing here to a different material. You could use like wood siding, or if you happen to have some 1x6 decking or something, 2x6 decking or something, tongue and groove or something, you could actually switch that out to a different kind of material entirely. I'm going to leave it plywood sheathing for our purposes. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click OK. And now you can see I have a much more reasonable looking roof in terms of what we're looking at here. So that's a good place to stop this video. And then in the next video, I will go ahead and show you how to create the roof beam system, get our beam at the right elevation and our roof at the correct elevation, as well as doing some decorative work on the beam over the cantilevered beam end cuts. For some scroll work, and then some decorative work on the roof rafters as well. And that will really complete the requirements for the assignment. You can continue on, it's recommended, and embellish the actual gazebo. Put a barbecue in, put a slab in, put a foundation system in if you'd like, based on what we've seen before. And then put people and furniture and some entourage in there as well to dress it up some. So that'll end this one for now, and then the next video we'll explore this further.